In the last video, we talked about how we can defend ourselves against crucial spatial disorientation and IMC after takeoff scenarios, which continue to account for a large amount of fatal general aviation accidents. In this video, we're talking about the scenarios that account for the largest amount of fatal accidents on our list. Let's talk about this and save some lives.
Approach Raven A1 about a mile south of Hobart, turn in eastbound at this time 500 feet VFR along the coast from Brooks Bridge, 1,000 feet below. And Raven A1, let's proceed continuing east along the coast beyond White Point, and we're going to be going to Alaclaw South, which is about 8 miles east of White Point along the inlet.
If you haven't yet, be sure to go download the AQP Supplement PDF on aviation101.com and go grab yourself some of the AQP flight review checklists on the eStore. This material is meant for both pilots and flight instructors. We want to change the mindset about recurrent training among general aviation pilots. We don't want to change the rules or regs. This is a grassroots movement, and we're starting this conversation right here, just between us, with the intention for you to continue this conversation and education with your instructor. And if you're an instructor, take this material and make it your own and teach it to your students and pilots, and hopefully we can all make this atrocious fatal accident rate in general aviation drop. In this video, we're talking about 4 scenarios that collectively account for the largest number of fatal accidents in general aviation: loss of thrust on takeoff, loss of speed awareness, unstabilized approaches, and messed up go-arounds. All of these have one major thing in common: loss of control. Let's define each of these. Loss of thrust on takeoff is exactly what it sounds like. Some sort of power plant failure, whether it's partial or total, single or twin, anytime right after takeoff. This scenario is often fatal because the pilot just isn't ready for it, and it usually results in a rapid decay of speed, leading to a loss of control because the pilot didn't act fast enough.
Now to the investigation underway into that plane crash that killed 10 people, the deadliest in Texas in decades. The small plane crashing into an airport hangar just after takeoff, exploding into flames.
This is the second twin-engine Beechcraft to crash this month. Less than 2 weeks ago, a different Beechcraft model crashed shortly after takeoff in Hawaii. That plane too bursting into flames. All 11 people on board were killed.
Loss of speed awareness is another huge killer. This happens when the pilot flat out lets the airplane get too slow. Normally there's nothing wrong with the plane or the weather when this happens. It usually ends with a stall spin into the ground with no survivors. It's amazing how many fatal examples we can find that were a result of the pilot just getting too slow. Unstabilized approaches and messed up go-arounds sort of go hand in hand. Can you define a stabilized approach for me? Is there a published FAA criteria that we can use to tell whether an approach is stabilized or not? There's none of that. When should you execute a go-around, and when should you continue to a landing? We want criteria that takes the guesswork out of these decisions. Before Dan walked me through these flight reviews, I couldn't answer those questions myself, and now we're going to answer all of them right here. Welcome to part 4. As we step through these topics, we're following the basic format of the questions under each of these scenarios outlined in the AQP PDF, so be sure to go download that and follow along. Loss of thrust on takeoff. And this is where people can really get into trouble because they're not expecting it. You wouldn't believe how fast your energy in the airplane, your airspeed, will decay when you chop the power, when your engine fails, especially when you're not expecting it. In our FAA check rides and recurrent training, what's more emphasized, stall recovery or stall avoidance? The standards teach recovery from the indications of an imminent stall, but what altitude do you normally practice these at? 2,000 to 3,000 feet above the ground normally. In real life, if we look at the data, at what altitude does a fatal stall normally start? It's below 1,000 AGL. Now hypothetically, let's take a super sharp and proficient pilot and put them into a full stall and spin below 1,000 feet AGL. Can we reasonably expect that pilot to recover before impacting the ground? No. And the fatality statistics back that up. When a pilot experiences a loss of power, they can expect to lose 3 to 4 seconds while they work through the startle factor of what just happened. And during that startled time, it's almost every pilot's instinct to pull back on the stick and raise the nose. Dan and I tested this in the Skyhawk. We put the airplane into a VX climb and we closed the throttle. The stall horn sounded in under 2 seconds.
Here's your engine failure. See that speed go away?
It decays really fast.
It decays real fast.
Right.
You went all the way down to the bottom of the green just like that. Get your guys into the mentality of as soon as you have that loss of sound, loss of power, loss of thrust, get on this push, get light in the seat, and then sort it out from there. Okay, we're going to do one more, okay?
Step 1 is to save your life. When you lose power, you lose your engine, And this needs to be muscle memory. It needs to be a habit. As soon as you lose your power, save your life. Push the nose down. Get that nose down. You need to get light in your seat. Step 2 is to pitch for best glide. Third step is then, once the aircraft is stabilized and the threat is neutralized of a stall spin, then you can decide what to do.
I have flight controls.
All right, your controls.
Flight controls.
Your controls. Let me know when you're ready.
All right. Let's just get it up to a speed a little bit below VY. We're just keeping our coordinated, add some of that right rudder, letting that speed come down. All right, go ahead and cover it up. All right, we lost the engine. Get light in our seats. We just saved our lives. All right, now we're going to pitch for best glide. We saved ourselves. Now I'm holding the airplane right about best glide, so this should be close to 80 miles an hour. We're pretty stabilized. Dan, you good with uncovering it now?
Yep. There you go.
A little bit faster, but that's okay. We got a buffer. We got some cushion, right?
Yep.
So the point of that is to not chase the airspeed. You don't want to dive. You're going to gain some extra knots there, and then be like, oh crap, now I want best glide, then like pitch way up to try and get it to slow down and do this oscillation. No, just get the nose down, save your life, then get to best glide. Just under, I mean, a hair under the horizon, 3 degrees. On a normal attitude indicator, you like almost can't even see the deflection.
Learn where the best glide pitch is for each airplane that you're flying.
That's right. All right, so I'm going to level off back here at 3,500. You're going to be at a significantly lower speed. You have less time to react. But it should be automatic, just like a Pavlov dog hearing the bell. You hear that engine drop, and you push that nose down. You lost your power. Get light in your seat. Light in your seat. Save your life. Get that airspeed back up, and then pitch for a best glide. Very graceful. Perfect. Great.
Nailed it.
3 simple steps.
Nailed it. Perfect.
Save your life, establish best glide, then decide what you're going to do. You got to save your life first. Brilliant. Let's start heading back west.
So does it make sense that we train and test stalls up high with somebody telling us that we're about to stall and we have engine power available for the recovery, and then we get into trouble in real life without someone there to warn us, we're surprised, we're down low, and we already have heavy task saturation in the cockpit from takeoff? Another aspect of loss of thrust on takeoff is the VMC rollover in a multi-engine. This is unfortunately what happened to this King Air departing Addison, Texas. The left engine failed shortly after rotation and the pilots didn't react fast enough before the airplane rolled over from the asymmetrical thrust and everyone was killed. A deficiency in speed can be deadly if the pilot loses their awareness as to how slow they're letting the airplane get. And that leads us to our next fatal scenario, loss of speed awareness. On March 14th, 2019, Skyhawk 8620 Bravo plowed into the ground just short of the approach end of runway 34 at Lakeway Air Park. This accident really got my attention because at the time, that was one of the airplanes that I had been flying a lot in. There was a student and an instructor on board this vintage Skyhawk, and on climb out off Lakeway, they supposedly had an engine issue according to an eyewitness, and they attempted the impossible turn back to the runway. They overshot the runway and attempted to overfly and make a tight pattern for the other end of the runway, and on base to final with flaps down, they entered a full stall and spin below 500 feet, and they never recovered. The student was killed and the instructor survived with severe injuries. The investigation concluded that the engine was running at the time of impact, but that's not the point. An engine failure doesn't cause an airplane to fall out of the sky like that. The pilot losing speed awareness does. Loss of speed awareness is one of the top killers in general aviation. For uncontrolled flight into terrain, people just lose control of the airplane because it's stalled. They got too slow. One way that we can really get our head in the game and become more airspeed aware is with what's called DMMS. DMMS stands for Defined Minimum Maneuvering Speed. And we can calculate that for any airplane. It's based on your clean stall speed. So when you're maneuvering, you don't want to get below this speed. It's your absolute minimum. It's not necessarily our target. If you're on it, you're at your minimum. Yeah. Give yourself a little buffer above our DMMS. 1.404 times your clean stall speed, VS1.
65.988.
And the tendency would be to pull up and to bank hard right here.
Okay,
You
gotcha.
compensated nicely. Give your guys a scenario like that. Put them through it. Let them see how DMMS is a reminder here for what you got.
Gotcha.
Set a defined minimum maneuvering speed on your airspeed indicator, placard it on the panel with a label maker, something that reminds you to never get below that speed while you're maneuvering the airplane. DMMS is still 30% above your stall speed. It's a safety buffer. Maneuvering includes flying around the pattern, which is where most of these accidents happen. The fatal base to final overshoot, if handled incorrectly, is just one common location that this fatal scenario usually starts.
Let's go ahead and turn final.
All right, now.
All right.
Whoop, overshot. I'm still watching my airspeed.
All right. So this is where people can really kill themselves,
That's
right?
right. Left, put that left rudder in, left cross control stall.
How many airplanes did we lose since January 1 this year? A day just like today, in the traffic pattern, coming in just like we did. How many fatal crashes have we had since January 1? Yeah. 7. Here's you, 30-degree bank at 90.5 and pulling up. That's where we're losing airplanes. You're right on the nuts edge here. So be conscious of what that speed is for your airplane. Try to honor it wherever you can, so we can keep Rob alive out there.
So 92 is the number, round up.
For most GA airplanes, your DMMS is calculated by multiplying your clean stall speed VS1 by 1.404. In the Skyhawk, that puts our minimum maneuvering speed right around 70 knots, and we marked it on the airspeed indicator with a piece of tape. The minimum maneuvering speed is just what it sounds like. It's the minimum speed you don't want to encroach while you're maneuvering the airplane. DMMS isn't taught on FAA check rides in general aviation, but the airlines are a different story. When was the last time you heard of an airliner falling out of the sky due to a spin on base to final? The placarded DMMS is actually 3 super useful tools all in one. It's a safe maneuvering speed to get you that 30% buffer above stall, a safe climb speed during normal climb, and your best glide speed during an engine failure. Do the calculations for your own plane for your own comparisons, but these 3 are surprisingly close to book values for most GA planes. When you're in a 30-degree bank turning base to final while trying to maintain altitude, maintaining a speed at or above your DMMS will give you roughly 30% buffer above your stall speed at that bank angle. Once you're established on the final approach path, it's okay to start to slow below your DMMS because you're no longer maneuvering the airplane. You're on a stabilized approach. Okay. But what defines a stabilized approach? If you ask the FAA, they couldn't tell you. The stabilized approach is mentioned countless times in the private pilot ACS, but it's never defined. A stabilized approach is also vaguely defined in the airplane flying handbook, but there's no definitive criteria that can lead us to conclusively say, yes, this approach is stabilized, or no, this approach is not stabilized. We want that definitive criteria. So we've developed that criteria. A stabilized approach consists of 4 elements. You're on your target final approach airspeed, you're on the target vertical path, you're on the extended runway center line, and you're on a path to land in your touchdown zone. If all 4 of those are met, you're on a stabilized approach. If you break any one of those, if you're far enough out on final, you can correct it, right? You can make little adjustments, and that's where we refine things. If you're, what would be your ref speed in the Cherokee?
About 75 mile an hour.
Let's say you're coming over the threshold of the runway at 90. Do you have all 4 of those met?
No.
So what would we want to do in that situation?
Go around.
Go around. I like it. It's important to also define what we call a gate. Think of it like a checkpoint for yourself and give yourself a deadline for being stabilized. ForeFlight will give an audible 500 feet call out when you're 500 feet above the ground on approach. And I like to use that as kind of a reminder point to check my approach and determine if I'm stabilized or not. I'll reply audibly with either 500 foot stabilized or unstabilized going around. 500 feet may be too early for some though. Sometimes we're already below 500 feet by the time we turn final. Just depends on the airplane that you're flying and the runway that you're approaching.
All right, is all of our criteria met? What was our ref speed?
75.
We're below 300. 59 November going around.
59 November, Roger.
But that's what we're talking about, a stabilized approach, recognizing that some of your criteria, one of your criteria is not met. And if it's not met by your deadline, your gate, 300 feet, go around.
Right.
The difference is on this airplane at this airport, we know for sure your airplane could definitely do it. With what you had, it would have worked and we would not have died. No doubt. You were totally cool. The objective is on this flight review is to see if you can do it. If it had been a 2,000-foot runway or a little bitty runway, can Miles truly get his airplane at 75 on center line, no more turns to make? So now on this one, the heat is on. We want to see on speed, on target for the last 300 feet on and have that 75 nailed. We wouldn't be doing all this effort if we weren't crashing airplanes at this exact point where you are right now. This is where they're falling out of the sky.
I'm going to call when I want you to turn final. Okay. Yeah, good buffer on that maneuvering speed.
And you're calling final.
I'll call your final. All right, let's go ahead and turn final now. Watch your speed there. Get a good buffer there. Nice. Okay, there you go. Put your nose down a little bit more. And it's okay if you overshot. Just keep the turn coming. There you go. So now we're at 30 degrees. We've got plenty of buffer. And you want to keep that airplane coordinated too. And you're not going to put it into a stall spin.
Now the wing's unloaded, add your flaps and fly your 75 the rest of the way in.
Yeah, once we get on center line, let's kind of maneuver for that here. There you go. And now you can get the airplane set up into your stabilized approach.
Slow it on up a little bit.
Yep, you're about 85 miles an hour now.
There you go.
And if you're a ref +5, it's no big deal, you know.
Tower, Skyhawk 6318 Delta is midfield, left downwind, runway 13 will be a full stop and request short approach if possible.
6318 Delta, make short approach, runway 13, clear to land.
Short approach, clear to land, runway 13, Delta.
Good job, good job.
So, what if you're approaching the runway threshold and you don't satisfy one or more of these stabilized approach criteria? Go around.
Let's go around.
Let's go around.
Okay, positive rate of climb. First notch of flaps comes up.
A messed up go-around is yet another scenario that can turn deadly in a hurry. On June 9th, 2016, Cirrus 4252 Golf fell out of the sky due to lack of airspeed on a go-around. Lots of factors led to this fatal accident. Air traffic control kept trying to work her into the same runway as a lot of the airline traffic and wasn't giving her enough space when the tone of her voice over the radio indicated she needed room to set up her approach. The tower told her to go around twice already because they worked her in too close to some of the airline traffic, and the pilot decided to execute her third go-around when she was too high and too fast on final. She wasn't stabilized, she recognized that, and she did a go-around. However, this SR-22 needs 81 to 83 knots indicated airspeed to safely raise the flaps. But the pilot unfortunately raised the flaps in a climbing left turn at 58 knots. A stall followed by a spin at low altitude led all three occupants to be killed at impact. In the Skyhawk, when I execute a go-around or a missed approach, I advance the power to full, push the carburetor heat in, get the nose above the horizon, and verbally call out and verify positive rate of climb, speed better than VY, flaps up. The key is to be proficient with your go-around procedures in the planes that you fly, and do not let ATC or any external forces pressure you and fluster you out of your responsibility of maintaining aircraft control. You're the pilot in command of your aircraft. You always have the option to tell ATC unable or I need some room to set up my approach, and if they can't accommodate that request, divert. You're the pilot in command. Use that authority to keep you and your passengers alive. These fatal scenarios are preventable. That's why we're discussing them. The key to prevention here is practice and proficiency. I hope you got something out of this video. We're aiming for this video series to be a guide for both pilots and instructors to start the conversation to address the general aviation fatal accident rate and what we can do as a community to be a part of the solution. That is AQP Grassroots. Please share this video everywhere you can. We want to get the word out about this grassroots movement to save lives, and that starts right here, so please share. I encourage you to go download the AQP supplement document and go grab some of those AQP flight review checklists on the Aviation 101 e-store. If you'd like to support what we do here at Aviation 101, you can shop merch and gear on the e-store, and you can join the exclusive community on Cockpit Club to see monthly live streams, giveaways, and exclusive content, of which will be the full-length briefings, flights, and debriefs from all of these pilots in this series. Those are coming soon to Cockpit Club. Be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next part of this series. And until next time, I want you to stay happy, healthy, and current, but most importantly, stay proficient. Keep your speed up and keep control of that airplane. Fly safe. We'll see you next time.